Many DMs start out running dungeons. They're easy to run because the structure of a dungeon limits the choices players can make. It's even in the name Dungeons and Dragons. Most of the time, characters don't live in the dungeon. Between adventures, they may spend time in a small town. But as characters go up in levels, the small town doesn't have all the resources they're going to need, so they'll start looking for a big city. In my last video, I talked about creating and detailing big cities for your games. But a city doesn't just have to be a place to visit to sell and buy gear between adventures. A city can be a place that adventures can happen. Let's talk about the kind of adventures you can run in cities.
Cool nerd Mark.
Let's start by talking about the differences and similarities between dungeons and city adventures. Since my day job for the last 25 years has been a K-12 teacher, let's use a Venn diagram. Both dungeons and city adventures have the same basic structure. The characters are presented with a goal to accomplish. In a dungeon, it might be finding a treasure, defeating a monster, or rescuing a prisoner. In a city, you could have these same goals, or it could be winning a tournament, solving a murder mystery, or as was the case in my last city adventure, completing a scavenger hunt as an unusual form of job interview. To achieve this goal, the characters must face a variety of challenges. In cities and in dungeons, this could include combat, skill challenges, and role-playing challenges. Not every adventure will have all of these, but giving your adventures a variety of challenges gives every character a chance to shine, or a chance to gloriously fumble. As the characters go through both types of adventures, they'll gain rewards. In dungeons, those tend to be XP and treasure, and those can be found in cities too. But cities can offer different kinds of rewards, such as allies, perks, and resources. For example, if the characters catch a thief who robbed a local armorer's shop, the shop owner may give them a discount next time they need their armor upgraded or repaired. Okay, now let's talk about differences. Dungeons have limited pathways. When you leave room B2, you only have 2 exits, a door and a passageway. If you choose the passageway, it travels for 30 feet, dead ends, and you can go left for 30 feet to a door with a small barred window with streaks of blood on the bars, or right for 40 feet to a cave entrance, where you can feel a rush of cold wind and hear the sound of running water. This kind of description invites some curiosity, some choice, but I only gave you a couple of choices. In a city, characters can go any direction and visit dozens or even hundreds of locations. However, I've noticed in dungeons, many players are completionists. They'll want to check out every room just in case it has some loot in it, regardless of the goal of their adventure. Most players don't behave the same way in a city. The choices of where to go have a purpose, either a goal that you provided them with, like an adventure hook, or things they choose to do to meet the needs of their characters. A priest might want to visit a temple of their deity, an archer might want to buy some arrows, and of course everybody wants to find an inn to stay for the night. You don't need to know what's in every house and every closet, just the locations that are relevant for your adventure and for meeting your PC's needs. Players can surprise you though, and it's good to be prepared to improvise. I like keeping a few extra names and character descriptions handy should I need to make up an NPC on the spot, and when I do, I try to jot it down, just a few basic notes in case they decide to visit that shop, that temple, or that tavern again. Random encounter tables for your city are also helpful when improvising in a city adventure. If you have time, you might want to create an encounter table specifically for your city. The 5e 2014 DMG has a nice compact urban encounter table you can use as an example, but I'll often pull out my first edition AD&D DMG and turn to page 191 where there's a detailed city encounter table. What I like about this table is that you have the same table but different results for the roll if you're in the city during the day versus in the night. At night, if you roll high enough, you could even run into a wraith, a will-o-wisp, or a vampire. Another difference is that dungeons are, for the most part, a lawless place, where might makes right and where killing and stealing from the occupants is expected. Cities, on the other hand, are places with some degree of law and order, especially during the daytime. Even if players are justified in their actions, they may face legal consequences or at least will need to explain any violence or theft they're involved in, unless they can keep it discreet. Finally, dungeon adventures are often destructive, while city adventures tend to be more interactive. Think about what a dungeon looks like before the characters arrive and what it looks like afterwards. Usually by the end of the adventure, dungeons are pretty empty. Its treasures removed, its traps disarmed or sprung, and its inhabitants killed, captured, or fled. In most cases, by the end of a city adventure, most of the inhabitants are still there and its buildings are still standing. Occasionally, it can be fun to burn your city to the ground, but I wouldn't recommend doing it every time. In most city adventures, your players will be interacting with the people and places in the setting, but not killing and looting everything that they see. For the rest of this video, I'd like to briefly talk about different kinds of city adventures. Each one of these could be its own video, so if you'd like to know more about any of these adventure types, let me know in the comments. Also, most of these kind of adventures also work in small towns. Let's start with investigations. If you want your players to talk to the NPCs you've created, visit interesting locations in your city, and face both social and potentially combat challenges, investigations are a good way to do that. They also give your characters a clear goal and purpose while they're in the city, whether it's solving a crime, finding the secret hideout of the Assassin's Guild, or investigating why the dinosaur bones in the museum are coming to life. Investigations can be a lot of fun. I try to answer two questions at the start of investigation. What is happening and why should the PCs get involved? This is important to establish because in a city, it's likely the players are not the only people who could potentially solve the problem. I tend to lean on two different reasons. They're getting involved because it's a job they've been hired to do because of their particular skill set, or it's personal. One of the reasons I like having the characters socially interact with NPCs is that in a future adventure, I can take any NPC they like and put them in danger, and then that's an instant adventure hook. When the bartender from their favorite tavern or the high priest at the paladin's temple is being held hostage, this is something that they will want to investigate. Not every city your players visit will be friendly. Just like in the real world, some cities are lawful and safe, and others are full of danger and chaos. The players may need to visit a city that is dangerous or even openly hostile to people who look like them or share their values. They may have to enter the city in disguise or under false pretenses, or at least keep a low profile. Think about James Bond movies. Part of what makes them exciting is Bond is usually traveling to exotic locations where you would expect people might be shooting at a British spy or attacking him with swords or dangerous hats. In my Pathfinder Reign of Winter campaign, the players had to travel to Whitethrone, the capital city of a nation run by evil witches, with the goal of stealing a large and valuable artifact out from the middle of the city in broad daylight. Not an easy task. Even getting into the city was an ordeal, and as they traveled around the city trying to meet their goal, they had to keep a low profile or be subject to attack, arrest, and imprisonment. Once they finally met their goal and temporarily plunged the city into chaos to provide the distraction they needed to steal that artifact, it was an epic conclusion to a 6-session arc. But after they left Whitethrone, it would only be a matter of weeks before the city would be very much as it was before. Events are another kind of city adventure. The first kind of city event that often comes to mind are social events. Parties, weddings, funerals, and council meetings are only a few examples of social events that your player characters might get invited to, but not all of these need to become an adventure. Some things we can just assume happen off camera, just like you don't describe every hour of a travel adventure. Social events become adventures when the players have a clear goal, challenges to face, and some kind of reward. I've been working on an adventure where the players meet a senator that is suspected to be a vampire during a party at a casino. They're having a friendly game of cards, and they must try to get him to talk, while carefully observing him and trying to learn what they can about his plans and evidence that the rumors about him are true. At the same time, he will be trying to learn what he can about the players, testing their will and their intentions before they ultimately meet him later at his castle. Festivals are events on a larger scale that can involve an entire neighborhood, district, or city. They bring a lot of extra people into town with the potential for more danger and intrigue. Important alliances and rivalries can be formed, and events like this can quickly escalate into disaster without someone like the player characters to respond. Festivals are also a great way to feature the culture or flavor of your setting, or even to show off subcultures such as immigrant communities. For example, if you have a district in your city with a large dwarven population, they could have Dwarven Heritage Day with axe throwing competitions and so much ale. But what happens if there are some anti dwarven extremists that decide they want to protest the event and things get out of hand? This could be a hook for your adventure. Festivals often have competitions, and these can be a lot of fun. Competitions give characters a way to test their skills outside of a traditional adventure. Jousting tournaments, bardic competitions, even pie eating contests can be a fun change of pace from a more serious campaign and can be a way for your PCs to meet NPCs who could later become allies or rivals. What if the knight who bested them in the joust is the son of an evil warlord who becomes enraged when, after the tournament, the princess does not want to take his hand in marriage? He then departs from the city and prepares to wage war. This creates an adventure where the PCs may work to prevent a war. Or maybe the competition is not tied to a festival. A job interview is essentially a competition, as is a fight in the gladiator pits. You can structure a number of different competitions. All you have to remember is what is the goal, what are the challenges, what are the rewards. The last kind of event I want to talk about are emergencies. Depending on the size and relative safety of your city, emergencies can be anywhere from very rare to uncommon. Some examples include fires, floods, violent storms, earthquakes, and attacks from monsters or even armies. Emergencies can be acts of nature or can be manufactured to do harm to the city or its leadership by hostile forces. In an event with emergencies, PCs can be called on to help first responders deal with threats, especially if they're well beyond the norm. For example, the local fire brigade in my adventure Bread Dog is trained to deal with fires, but they call the PCs for help when they discover the source of the fire is a hellhound. This has been a fun adventure to run because both times I ran it, half the party was focused on fighting the monster, while the other half decided to focus on being firefighters. Since there aren't any specific rules for firefighting in the game, I had to do a little research on what a medieval fire brigade's equipment would look like, and I created some mechanics on how the fire spreads and what it takes to put it out. Whatever emergency you decide to create, use it as an opportunity for players to choose between managing the threat, defeating the source, and protecting and saving innocent victims. This creates a dynamic and fun encounter for you to run. Can't decide between a city and a dungeon adventure? Why not both? I love urban dungeons. All the excitement of a dungeon adventure, but with a much shorter commute. Sewers are a natural place to put a dungeon under your city. Cities generate a lot of waste, and it's got to go somewhere. Given half a reason, adventurers are just crazy enough to open up that sewer hatch and climb right in. Sewers are dark, gross, and great places to put some creepy, crawly, and disgusting monsters to fight. Giant spiders, carrion crawlers, oozes, and I guess mutant ninja turtles could inhabit your sewers, as well as other more humanoid creatures that use sewers as a place to hide out or do crimes. I once ran a mega dungeon campaign called the Emerald Spire Super Dungeon, and between adventures, my players wanted a big city. Between adventures, my players wanted a big city to sell all the magic items they didn't want. There was not a magic items shop in the city, so I decided to put it down in the sewers. Easy to avoid all those pesky sales taxes that way. Once they fought their way through a few horrors and found the magic item shop, the PCs really got interested in what else was down in the sewers. 3 sessions later, after they had fully mapped out the sewers under the city, one of them said, "Oh yeah, wasn't there this other dungeon we were supposed to be exploring?" Eventually, we did make it back to the Emerald Spire dungeon, but they had a great little side quest mucking around in my magically warped sewer, since all that illicit magic item trade had, let's say, some environmental consequences. Heists are almost a whole other genre of story, and even when they are located above ground, they kind of feel like a dungeon. I think it's because heists, like dungeons, have a goal to remove something from a location. This can be a simple theft or even something like rescuing a prisoner. The challenge is that there is usually someone who doesn't want the thing removed, and in a city, there's the additional threat of the entire legal system could come down on the party should the heist fail. Heists usually have 4 phases: planning, execution, completion, and resolution. The characters begin by doing some espionage to prepare for the heist. Sometimes they call that casing the joint. As they learn about the location, its defenses, and its weaknesses, they can gain some advantages that will help in the execution of the heist. In the execution phase, when the timing is right, the players put their plan into action. In almost every story of this nature, things never go exactly according to the plan, and your adventure should be no exception. Throw in one or more complications that require the players to adjust their plan in the middle. Maybe another guard shows up that they weren't planning for. Or there's another group of thieves that show up to steal the exact same treasure. Or they discover the princess they broke into the castle to save has been moved to another castle. Eventually, though, the heist should come to a resolution. They were able to get the thing that they had planned to get. It just wasn't as easy as they thought. And that will make it more memorable and more fun. Does your city not have enough city on the above ground level? An undercity is a great way to add another darker layer to your city. It's like a whole other darker, more sinister city that few know about that is below your city, even lower than the sewers. First exposure that I had to an undercity was as a kid when I played the Atari 2600 game Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was one of the best games in the system once you figured out how to use both joysticks for a one-player game. Early in the game, you find the Cairo Market, where you can buy a parachute and a gun with a few bullets. But once you're out of those bullets, you're out. Later, if you find the hidden black market, you can purchase more bullets and the most illicit of all items, a shovel. I always wondered why that was a black market item. Later, when I ran Undermountain back in the 90s, the third level contained the Undercity of Skullport, which was later developed into an entire book for the Forgotten Realms setting. Skullport was such an amazing place that was built inside a large cavern where vampires, mind flayers, beholders, all kinds of crazy monsters roamed the streets, and where the local police force were floating magical skulls. In the world I've been building this year, I put an undercity in Leshmira, the capital of my Eastern European-inspired nation of Karsovia. This undercity is ironically located right under the hill where the Capitol building is located, and contains a black market, a thieves guild, and an assassins guild. It needs some more work, but I look forward to running some adventures there next month. Which leads us to the final type of urban dungeon, and that is classic dungeons. These have been a staple of D&D since the beginning. An urban dungeon can be in, near, or under a city. Notable examples from D&D history are Castle Greyhawk, which sits on a hill just outside Greyhawk City, Undermountain, which lies under the city of Waterdeep in Forgotten Realms, and the Blue Alley, also in Waterdeep, a magical dungeon which is kind of like an escape room for adventurers. Urban dungeons can also be any large structure in a city where the normal rules of city behavior don't apply, and there's challenge and potential for combat, traps, and loot. Although I don't recommend the D&D movie that came out in the year 2000, there is a 4-minute portion that is the best part of the movie where the main character has to navigate a deadly maze. Skip the movie and watch that clip, which I'll also link in the description, and then go watch the 2023 movie. That one's a keeper. By the way, I liked Undermountain so much I wrote a song about it. That's right, I do music too. Down the Well tells about the Yawning Portal, that bar in Waterdeep where people meet to drink and salute brave adventurers who volunteer to be lowered down into a well in the center of the tavern, to enter the giant dungeon of Undermountain and either come back rich or die trying. I'm joined on the song by my 2 brothers, who each contribute a verse to the song and also contribute some background vocals and lots of shouting. It's a classic drinking song with only acoustic instruments, and I made a cheap music video to go with it. You can check out the video, and if you like it, the song is available on my CD, The Remaster, for download on Bandcamp, and available to stream anywhere you would like to do that. For my next video, I'd like to talk about the rules that I'd like to see come back that used to make the game better. I was inspired to make this when I read that they brought back the bloodied condition from 4th edition in the new 5.5e rules. And it made me think about other rules that I used to like that have the potential, I think, to make a comeback. I hope you'll join me for that one too. Bye for now.
So we lift our cups and we bid a fond farewell. We hope to see you again when you come back from the well.